Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, after disastrous results in last year's general election, the LibDems are hoping for some better luck this week. The leader, Tim Farron, says the local elections are utterly critical, his words, for the party's survival, revival and rebirth, as they go on to defend just over 300 seats in England. But has Mr Farron's leadership over the past year made any difference to the LibDems' fortunes? The last general election left the party in a sorry state, going from 57 MPs down to a measly 8. The result caused former leader Nick Clegg to resign the very next day, triggering a party leadership election. Two candidates went head-to-head, the former party president Tim Farron and former Care Minister Norman Lamb. Mr Farron emerged victorious.
I am up for this, you are up for this. I'm optimistic, but it will take hard work, guts and bloody mindedness.
Over the last year, Mr Farron has had to remind the political classes that even with only 8 MPs, his party is still a force to be reckoned with in British politics. Although the Lib Dems successfully used their 100-odd peers to defeat the government in the Lords over tax credits, trade union reform and child refugees, Lord Renner's resignation from the party executive and the legal challenge over the election of MP Alistair Carmichael has only made the journey more challenging for the party and its leader. And next week, Mr Farron will once again be put to the test. And Tim Farron joins me now from Cumbria. Mr Farron, the Tories are in civil war over Europe. Labour's ripping itself apart over anti-Semitism. Both the big parties are polling badly. Couldn't be a better time for a Lib Dem comeback, could there?
Yeah, well, I think you've summed it up very nicely, not just that space that there is for the Liberal Democrats, but also, frankly, the very challenging circumstances for us that we work from. Last May's election result was obviously devastating, and I'm going to argue it was devastating for the country as it was for the Liberal Democrats. You point out very, very clearly, you think of all these huge issues going on at the moment, the attack on junior doctors, the balkanisation, even potential privatisation of our school system across the United Kingdom, a heartless approach to orphaned refugees in Europe, and yet we're talking about divisions within the Labour Party, and they are indeed the most ineffective official opposition probably in British political history.
So
great opportunity for us,
what
but
would
of course
a
we
comeback
come back
look like?
from a difficult result for us. Well, I mean, a comeback would look like a 50% increase in our membership and us gaining more by-election, council by-election seats and more votes in those by-elections than any other party, which incidentally is exactly what's happening. So there is a real sense that we are finding people on the doorstep wherever I go, being very ready to listen to our message. Yes, we've got to fight for attention. Yes, we've got to fight to get onto the stage at all. The results last May put us in that position. But look, as I said in the speech you clipped before, I'm an optimistic kind of person. I am glass half full. We have an enormous challenge on our plate. We have a Tory government which I think is very arrogant, taking for granted the fact they're in office, being all the more arrogant because their official opposition is so shockingly divided and shambolic, and the desperately needs for the good of Britain to be a Liberal Democrat revival. And
well,
so my
right.
offer to people across Britain on May the 5th is to make sure that that happens.
So given that you're doing so well in local government by-elections, you must hope to do much better on Thursday than the 331 English councillors you currently have.
Well, I think I would be into dangerous territory if I start giving you figures, but I am increasingly confident that we're going to do much better than we did last May. The sense that I'm getting on the doorstep around the country is positive. People listening to us, lots of people who are, should we say, progressive, centre-left voters who just feel utterly disappointed with the Labour Party as a movement at the moment, and many people very switched off by the Conservatives. And one very obvious example of that was the councillor in Yeovil, who's a caseworker for the Conservative MP there, who defected to the Liberal Democrats, not just changing her party, but actually having to give up her job in the process because she realised that what the Tories were offering last May is not what they're delivering this May. They have, in many ways, undermined the recovery we helped to build, and they've started down a road of serious unfairness, taking away funding for people on disability, people who are dependent upon our National Health Service and our care services, and indeed behaving in an inhuman way towards those child refugees. So there is a sense of movement towards us. I expect it not to be an overnight success, but we are looking at...
Will you add to your tally of council seats?
And this revival might happen.
Will you add to your tally of council seats?
I hope so. I hope so, and I couldn't tell you either way.
Well, you've been telling me how well you're doing in the local government by-elections. Why wouldn't you therefore do just as well on Thursday, the big election?
There's a big difference, Andrew. I am telling you things that have happened. I am not capable of telling you things that are going to happen. It's all about, where we are.
So well, let me come on to your key message.
If that pattern is repeated, then we will be doing well.
Let me come on. Your key message for the local elections is you're pledging, and I quote you, to fight unnecessary cuts to community services. How credible is that when you spent 5 years in power with the Tories presiding over these cuts?
Well, we spent 5 years righting the economy and making some very tough decisions and actually protecting so many frontline services from those cuts. And I think what's happened is that over 5 years, we helped to get the country to the position where the books were all but balanced. And we've got to a crossroads where we make a decision as a country. Do we carry on cutting, or is this the time we say, right, we've stabilised the financial situation, now it's the time to go easy and indeed to put money into frontline services?
Well,
so you see at this point in time, we've got a Conservative government that has chosen to give away tax cuts to the wealthy, corporation tax cuts, inheritance tax cuts, for example, at a time it's then passing on cuts through local government to social services, to schools, highways, and so on. So we say politics is about choosing. And at this point, having got the economy back to, or back from the brink, this is the point that a government, and if the Liberal Democrats were in government, we would be choosing not to give away tax cuts to the wealthy. We would instead be supporting public services such as those run by local authorities.
Well, when you were in power, when you were in government, you closed 350 libraries, you closed 350 youth centres, and you closed around 600 Sure Start centres. And now you pose as the anti-cuts party. Nobody's going to believe you, are they?
And when we were in government, we prevented the Conservatives making far greater cuts, as everybody knows. I mean, one of the great, I suppose, sadnesses for me, or an irony, perhaps that's a better way of putting it, is that it's taken the last 12 months of seeing what the Conservatives do without us to see what a difference we made.
Well,
so,
they
for
managed
example,
600. They managed 600 Short Start centres with you in power. And now you come and tell the voters, oh, you're against all these cuts you presided over in government.
So I'm not Jeremy Corbyn. I'm not going to come onto this programme and say that you never need to make tough decisions in government. We were very clear that over those 5 years we were acting in the national interest to balance the books. The mess that we'd inherited, whether you blame Labour or the banks, it doesn't really matter to me. The mess was clearly there. And we behaved in a responsible way in government. But what we didn't do was go and make unnecessary additional cuts that were not required. But I'll give you one very clear example. One of the issues that we should be talking more about this week, but sadly Labour's internal divisions has taken it off the front pages, is the junior doctors scandal. Remember that just over a year ago, it was my colleague Norman Lamb who prevented that contract being written in the first place. It was only the Conservatives getting into power on their own and without us that meant that they pushed forward with that attack on our National Health Service. So the difference we've made, so for example, the forced academisation of schools, something that we blocked, the further cuts to police that we blocked, the Conservatives are now putting in place. Now, we're a party that believes you must live within your means. We must live within our ability to fund public services on a basis of how wealthy the country is. But over 5 tough years, the Liberal Democrats helped to balance the books and get us out of a financial crisis.
Well,
we say at this point, you don't then go to choose to make more cuts that you don't need to make.
You didn't balance the books, Mr. Farron.
We have the opportunity.
You didn't balance the books. You left behind a deficit of about £88 billion when you got out of government. But let me just finally ask you this. You got 5 members in Holyrood, 5 members in the Cardiff Assembly, 2 in the London Assembly, and of the seats up for grabs in the English local elections, 331 councillors. If you don't improve in at least a couple of these areas, does your leadership come under question? Does it have consequences for you?
Well, I mean, over the last 12 months, I mean, you set out the case very clearly at the beginning of this interview We've been coming back from what was a devastating result for us. I don't expect it to be an overnight success. But my sense is, as I've been knocking on doors in each of those arenas, shall we say, over the last few weeks, is that you're finding a warming towards the Liberal Democrat message, a real sense that if you vote Liberal Democrat, then it makes a difference, that you have people working on the ground in your local community who get things done, who keep in touch, a commitment to the politics of the community.
Sure. So you do better. I'm just trying to find out if you do better or not.
Well, I'm no more a soothsayer than you are, Andrew, but I am optimistic about how we're going to do this week. It certainly feels much more positive than it did a year ago. And let's just remember this, with a shocking Tory government, arrogant as it is, and a Labour opposition which is so utterly shambolic, this is a moment where the Liberal Democrats, for the good of the country, need to recover. I'm very hopeful this week that we will.
Tim Farron, thank you for your time.